Hi everybody, Dan Illman here, kicking off a pick 5 at Santa Anita on Sunday with the Grade 3 San Juan Capistrano. We're going 1.75 miles on the turf, and we're going to take a look at this field. The San Juan Capistrano has a very rich history in American racing, but unfortunately it's become a bit of a dinosaur in 21st century racing in the United States. We just don't have horses that can go 1.75 miles anymore, and thus very few of these races are carded. One horse that has no problem with the distance is a horse that's won the San Juan Capistrano in the past, and that's the number 5 Red King, who won this race in 2020 and goes out for Phil D'Amato, a trainer that's had a virtual stranglehold on this race in recent years. He's getting a little bit long in the tooth, perhaps, as he ages, does Red King, but this is a horse that can still step, and he's probably the horse to beat simply because we know he wants the distance. We will throw up the Timeform US Pace Projector, but let's take the Pace Projector with a grain of salt, going 1.75 miles. Avenue is a horse that was 8th of 12 at the pace call last time out, but he is stretching out from 1 1/8, and maybe he'll show a little bit of speed. I wouldn't be surprised if the horse down towards the rail break point tries to get close to the pace in here. Who knows what we're going to get from the Peruvian invader, the number 6 Muhammad Ali. Red King is versatile enough to pretty much stay wherever. I think pace is probably less of a handicapping factor in this race than distance. Let's talk a little bit about the number 1 Breakpoint, making his first start for trainer Neil Drysdale. This horse ran very well in his native Chile, going 1.5 miles, but he had 4 races, 2 for Chad Brown, 2 for Steve Asmussen in North America thus far, and he just hasn't run very well in any of them. Maybe you could make an excuse for his most recent start. That was the Sycamore last fall at Keeneland, where he was up close to a pretty legitimate pace. He tired very badly in a race that produced 2 next out winners. The runner-up would come back to run 3rd in the Bradley at Fairgrounds with a 95 Beyer speed figure, and would also win a stake later in the Fairgrounds meet. I do think this horse has some tactical speed, and maybe just getting out to Southern California will help him with the perhaps firmer ground, but I need to see some more out of Breakpoint. I do respect Neil Drysdale with these kind of horses, and again, this is a horse that can show a bit of tactical speed. Kazan, the number 2, they're kind of taking a shot with this horse, stretching out in distance off of a 5th place finish in a $40,000 claiming race. The good news is he finished directly ahead of a horse that came back to win for $50,000 with a 96 Beyer speed figure. So this horse might be able to show a little bit more speed, stretching out 6 furlongs from that mile race last time out, freshened from the last race about 2 months. Kazan, though, going to get a big class test. Avenue is the number 3, and to me Avenue is sort of the key to this race, because when you watch Avenue run, you get the feeling that he wants to go longer. When he was with Todd Pletcher earlier in his career, Todd never even thought about running him in a sprint. He ran him 3 times, all at 1.16 or greater. Michael McCarthy has now had him twice. In his most recent start, going 1.8 miles, he was in and among horses on the turn, and he was just grinding away. Maybe he was stopped a little bit, just doesn't have the agility to hit a hole at a very fast rate of speed, and he got going late in the game and finished 4th, behind a couple of next now winners. The winner coming back to score a $50,000 claimer with a 94 Beyer speed figure. That horse is an 11-time winner. Perhaps most importantly, you look at Avenue and you see he wants distance just from his grinding style. And then you look at his pedigree and you'll note he's a half-brother to Tiz Magician, a horse that got very good when stretched out going marathon distances. I think this is what Avenue wants to do, and I think he's playable if he goes off around 9-2 or 5-1 on the tote. Dean Martini is next, and he has some credentials on dirt. He won the 2020 edition of the Ohio Derby at a big price, and since then he's been bouncing around on dirt, and Peter Urton's tried to resurrect his career as a turf horse. He's run him twice this year, once at 1 mile, once at 1.25 miles, and they'll just continue stretching him out. He was beaten 5 lengths in the Whittingham last time out. I didn't see much of an excuse, although maybe he was bounced around in the early portion of that race. It was a good feel. The runner-up came back to run 3rd in the Shoemaker Mile, a grade 1 with a 97 Beyer speed figure, and maybe some class relief in this race for Dean Martini, who must prove he can get the distance. Red King, as I mentioned earlier, can get the distance. We're going to watch his most recent start. He was offered for an $80,000 tag that day, going 1.25 miles, and he finished 2nd behind an odds-on favorite. The race before that, the San Luis Rey, perhaps he underperformed a little bit, but he was wired that day by Acclimate, who would be bet very heavily if he was in this race. Red King's last victory came for an $80,000 tag, but he has plenty of back class. It appears he can still run, and 1.75 miles is what he wants to do. Muhammad Ali is the number 6, and he's going to try to last the distance, if not come up with a knockout. He is from Peru, and I'm really not sure what kind of horses he was facing over there, and I wish he had a slightly better record. He was 2 for 20 in Peru. He shows up in the States now in his first start since October, going 14 furlongs as a new gelding. Anything can happen in these 14 furlong races. I want to take a wait-and-see approach, even though this horse will be likely a big price on the tote. Modus Operandi is up next, and this horse tried to stretch out to 1.5 miles in his last couple of races without much success. He was a big price in the Grade 3 Louisville last time out, and he just sort of was one pace throughout. One of the horses out of that race came back to win a state-bred stake at Hawthorne in his next start with a 90 Beyer speed figure. This is a horse that has won going 1.5 miles. I'm not worried about distance. That race, however, was on a synthetic surface. I am worried about him going up against better horses on the turf. If Red King stubs his toe, and I am wrong about the distance capabilities of Avenue, Projector might be the one you want to take because he's won 2 of his last 3 starts. This horse began his career with some talent in Southern California. He went to the East Coast for Saffie Joseph. He really had a middling record, running in mostly starter allowance races. They brought him back to Southern California. They gave him the Phil D'Amato. He's won 2 of 3, including this race, a $25,000 starter allowance last time out. This is a horse that's done very well at 1.5 miles right now, and maybe he's just the now horse coming into this race. If you believe that Red King might be tailing a bit off form, Projector might have a bit of upside, and a good combination of upside, back class, and distance ability. I really wanted to try to beat Red King in this race because he is getting older. He's 8 years old right now, and maybe he's not the Red King that won this race in 2020, but he might not have to be. He'll be my top selection, but I also want to use the horse stretching out for the first time, the horse with the distance pedigree, and the horse with the grinding style that can be very effective at this trip, and that's the number 3 Avenue. It's the San Juan Capistrano. It's one of 2 graded stakes races on turf at Santa Anita on Sunday. Good luck.